We've got a really great show coming up for you on American Black Journal. Our Black Church in Detroit series examines the life of a preacher's kid. We're going to talk with three offspring of Detroit pastors about their experiences growing up in the church and their perspectives on the Black church today. Plus, we'll talk about how being a preacher's kid influenced their lives. Stay where you are. American Black Journal starts right now.
From Delta faucets to Behr paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Support also provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV.
The DTE Foundation proudly supports 50 years of American Black Journal in covering African American history, culture, and politics. The DTE Foundation and American Black Journal partners in presenting African American perspectives about our communities and in our world.
Also brought to you by Nissan Foundation and viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson, your host. Today we're continuing our series on the Black Church in Detroit, which is produced in partnership with the Ecumenical Theological Seminary and the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. We are taking a look at the experiences and perspectives of preachers' kids, often referred to as PKs. I sat down for a conversation with three Detroit PKs, Reverend Charles Christian Adams, who is senior pastor at Hartford Memorial Baptist Church and son of Pastor Emeritus Dr. Charles G. Adams, Freda Sampson, who is daughter of the late Reverend Dr. Frederick G. Sampson II of Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church, and Kaletah Vancol, who is daughter of Reverend Kenneth of Greater New Mount Moriah Baptist Church. Freda, I'm going to start with you, and I want to start with a really kind of specific question about growing up as the daughter of a pastor. I want to know at what point you became aware that that was who your father was and what he did and what it meant to you. Like, what was the point where that started to really sink in?
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Great question. I have to say, I probably noticed it. I was aware of his role really very young. I'm going to go as early as maybe 4 years old. It just became very distinctive being in the church as a little kid running around, kind of the space that he held as pastor, right? There was something even as a little kid that I got was really a special experience. And then it began to really impact me in some substantive ways at different points in my various life cycles. So it meant one thing to me when I was a little kid, and as I became a teenager, my father literally was the coolest parent ever. And so there was a particular pride in knowing that he held so much regard and esteem in the community, and it just shone a light on me in terms of opportunities made available for me. And again, in my adult years, and even though he transitioned over 21 years, Stephen, I tell you, even in this moment, every time I go outside the walls of my office or my home,
you feel that.
I still feel it.
Yeah. Charles, same question to you. Tell me about realizing that this was who you were and where you come from, and how important that all was.
Well, and when I was very, very young, growing up in the 70s, I'll tell you what struck me first was my dad always wore a suit to work. And I remember just on TV looking at the icons of that era. He reminded me of George Jefferson because George Jefferson always had this three-piece suit on.
He did.
And, it kind of, he reminded me of that. I didn't have overalls or, some casual. He was always overdressed everywhere. So he was always overdressed. And somebody said he was born in a suit, but I think that's a rumor. He would just wear a shirt and tie for no reason. So, but Daddy, what are you doing today? Well, I'm not sure. Well, why do you have on a shirt and tie? But when I got older, I believe what impressed me most of all was this whole idea of what he was doing was always community oriented. There was always something having to do with community, and then the pastoral visits, the hospitals in the middle of the night. I never knew him to have office hours, and there was never really a day off.
Yeah.
And we really didn't take that many family vacations. We were usually at the convention, the Progressive National Baptist Convention. So I would just hope for a pool. But I think even then I didn't understand the full significance of what being a pastor meant.
Right. Until you became a pastor yourself, I'm sure, and we'll come back and talk a little more about that. Okay, Kaletah, tell us about the time when you realized, or first realized, that your dad was a pastor, and started to understand what that meant for you and for your family.
It's interesting. I think I probably didn't realize it until we had moved to Detroit. I was probably maybe in like first or second grade. So I guess around 6 maybe or 7. And I think I just noticed that, we were always surrounded by so many people at the church. There was, he was always being pulled in different directions. He, if you know my dad, what he does is when he's preaching, he gets riled up at the end, and he'll start singing, "Get right, church, and let's go home." And so, I will be sitting with my mom, and we will watch him as he did his little tune up and his dancing. And I think it kind of all of a sudden made sense, like, oh, this is what he does on a regular basis. Like, this is his job. He's going to hospital visits, and he's doing funerals, and he's speaking at all these different places. And so I think it was in those moments that I realized that, okay, I guess I guess his job is a preacher, whereas like my mom had a different job, and, all of my friends had all these other titles, or their parents had all these other titles. And so I think it kind of made sense, like, oh, that is your full-time job, is a preacher. So,
Yeah. So Freda, back to you. And I have to say up front, of course, I know of all of your fathers, and have lived in the city with their legacies for a long time. But I want to have each of you talk some about those legacies and how important they are, and then we'll get to what that sort of has meant for you in choosing what you do and the way that you operate in the city. But for viewers who maybe don't know or don't remember, talk a little, Freda, about who your father was and what he did here in the city.
I'm going to try to answer this question as succinctly as possible.
Yeah.
Steve,
I was going to say, we need like 5 hours, but
right. I could literally just go on and on, but I will be as brief as possible. My father really engaged in what has been termed as practical theology. He was brilliant in every capacity, but he was always deeply connected to community. And he acted out that relationship, that connection, as part of his legacy by really fully indulging and engaging in lifting the community where the church was, but then having that cascade out to even go beyond the walls of Detroit and into the region and on and on. And so I think his legacy is wrapped around his theological genius, that's wrapped around his capacity to be compassionate, to be visible, to know who you are. It's so important. Our pastors and our theological leaders, our preachers, to know, when you are a parishioner, for your pastor to know your name is literally everything, because it says, I see you. And he was amazing at doing that. And the stories that I've heard throughout my life, where he has gone to McDonald's for a cup of coffee and people were able to get a whole sermon because they said, good morning, Doc. And that's all it took. Right? And some of that just really, it permeates to who he was. And of course, and I'll wrap it up here, of course, he was a profound civil rights organizer, leader, and something that began in Roanoke, Virginia, carried with him to Louisville, Kentucky, and really played out loud here as well in Detroit. So his legacy is multi-tiered and dare I say, still very much alive.
Yes, very much alive in our city. Charles, talk a little about your dad, Charles Adams.
Yeah, he always gave me a lot of love and affirmation. And that was also a part of the community that we grew up in too. Whatever the opinion of Black people was in the general society, you knew when you got to church that you were loved and affirmed. And it was something that transcended, I think, the normative understanding of the value of Black people. And he reflected that kind of attitude. I was special. I felt special. I felt like I could do anything that anybody else could do. And certainly he exuded a kind of independence that I took note of, that it was like he was his own boss. And so it didn't seem like he was reporting to somebody, and particularly white people. And I know that is, and I appreciate now, one of the curious aspects of the Black church, that it is an independent institution, at least ideally. We know that's not always the case from top to bottom. Certainly, there are some that have more rigid polity and structure, whereas Hartford, being Baptist, we took our autonomy seriously. And even then, it was a strong pastor type of church, right? The deacons didn't try to boss them around. The trustees didn't boss them around. They worked together, but certainly they deferred to his leadership. And so I always saw him with that independence. And I think lastly, like Martin Luther King was no bigger to me than my dad. In a lot of ways, I saw Martin Luther King Jr.'s, I saw them, they were alike. So I don't think I processed it as a young man that Martin Luther King Jr. had a profound influence on him. But certainly, as was said by Freda, the love of people and community was there, and I felt that in ways that were similar to some of your civil rights leaders and activists. It was there on a personal level, but it was there on a social scale.
Yeah.
So love on a social scale looks like justice, as Howard Thurman said. We saw that. We saw that for sure.
Yeah. Kaletah, what about your dad and his legacy?
So when it comes to my dad and his legacy, he is probably most known for relationships. He prides himself on making everyone feel as though they are this close to him. He makes everyone feel that they are important, that he genuinely cares about their well-being. He will genuinely show up for them in any capacity, no matter what time of day, no matter what's going on in his personal life. He prides himself on showing up and being there for anyone in need whenever they are in need. And so, when it comes to like the church, and, as I think Freda mentioned, if he's in like a restaurant, there's always, he can't go anywhere without somebody recognizing him, having that conversation. And it doesn't matter if he's in a rush or not, he'll stop, he'll have that conversation. He will call them out by name. He will call out their family, their mother, their sister, their auntie, their uncle, whoever, and just say, hey, how is so-and-so doing? And so I think that that is one of the main things that he's known for. But he also prides himself on speaking out on what's right or on any injustices that are currently happening. And so he will often integrate current situations in the public eye, current political situations into his sermons, because he wants to use his platform and his voice to speak out against anything that may be happening at that current time. He also prides himself on trying to bridge the gap between the Jewish community and other religions, and trying to kind of step outside of just the Baptist church or just the Christian world, and trying to bridge the gap to bring us all together. And so he has been to Israel numerous times. He's been to Washington, D.C. to speak about or to speak with AIPAC, and trying to have those conversations to try to bring us all together, because I think that is something that really hits home for him. So he has a pretty wide legacy. He, speaks all over the country, all over the world. But I think the main things would be relationships with everyone around him, speaking out against what is or against the injustices, and then trying to bridge the gap amongst all of the different religions in the world.
Yeah. So I want to talk in the time we have left about the ways in which your fathers have inspired your work in your lives, and I know that there has been an incredible influence for all of you from that. But Freda, I'll start with you again. Tell us about how your dad and his legacy really shape in many ways the work that you do in our city now.
I have to say, Stephen, in more ways than I can count, in ways that, quite frankly, I discover almost daily. Oh, I see the influence of his footprint in my life in a way that maybe didn't even feel so visible a week prior. The work I do is I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategist. And so I am continually in conversation that is reflective of equity, of inclusion, of relationships. And that is a value that was instilled upon me through the work and through his life, right? I saw, as Reverend Christian indicated, I saw what justice looked like in the form of love by his behavior and by his commitment to humanity and the broad scope of humanity. But let me be clear, he was furiously committed to Black folk and the equity and the access and the opportunities that are key critical for our community, for us to be able to rise to our highest and best self. And so his work, his momentum around his activism in that capacity, but also what I learned in terms of how to be in relationship with people that you don't always necessarily, let me be frank, agree with, right? And so, and how dynamic it is as a skill to be able to share and engage and love people that don't always align with what is important or what it is that you're trying to accomplish. I mean, I think that's a pastoral skill, right? That you got to, when you're the leader of a flock, you've got to be able to embrace and love everybody in that flock. Yeah. And he taught me in very important ways, with patience and with thoughtfulness what empathy and what sincere commitment look like. And I hope that it has had some positive effect in what I do.
Yeah. So Reverend Adams, you are following almost literally in your footsteps, same place.
We know it's not always the case, right? As
Right.
Sister Sampson's brother, of course, followed her dad into the pastorate. But as you are both an example of how you can not, you can catch the essence of what they do. My sister as well, who you heal communities, she heals cancer. You heal because you love. You're a part of that process. You are a part of the love of God, and I think that's the influence that my dad's ministry had on me. I mean, he just seemed to love everybody, and I don't think you appreciate when you're younger the tremendous ache that causes, to grieve with those who grieve, to mourn with those who mourn, and somebody told me one time, they said, be patient with your dad because he's buried 3 churches. And I kind of laughed at that. But, as I got older, I said, yeah, I get it. It takes something out of you, but it is who you are. It's empathy. And at a young age, I had it. And I believe it was the influence, not only of him, he's a very nice person, but my mother was also a very nice person and very empathetic towards me and my friends. And so it just kind of carried on, this love and this empathy that comes with the love of God. And everybody doesn't see it that way. Some people just more doctrinal, more dogmatic, more legalistic. But we emphasized, and what impressed upon me was to take sacerdotal exercise seriously, to take, my daddy used to say, if these are holy things, you take them serious. If you want a plaything, go get a toy. However, they were always penultimate to the love part, to the love of God and humanity.
Yeah.
Love of God towards humanity.
Right. Kaletah, how do you see your dad's influence in your work?
So, I actually went off to school to become a teacher, and I was in education for about 10 years. I just transitioned out, but I think that the idea of teaching and pouring into others on a daily basis, and the idea of giving of yourself every day to lead and guide people in the right direction is something that really hit home with me. Building those personal relationships, encouraging and uplifting others, I think that is what resonated with me. I'm very big on building relationships with those that I work with, that I encounter with. And so as an educator, I'll speak to that part. The time that it takes, teaching is it's parallel in the world of pastor, because your job is not just during the regular school hours. You have to pour in before work, after work, finding time all around you to prepare for what you will do day to day in the school setting. And so I think that, always keeping in mind the needs of my students, what is it that I can do to help make an impact, a positive impact in their lives. I think that is, that was my driving force every day with my students. And so when I think about my dad and how what he does on a daily basis impacted that, I mean, that's literally what he does every day, all day, 24/7. He is on call, day or night, working to have that positive impact and to meet the needs of those that he comes in contact with.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we got to the end of this without any bad stories about preachers' kids and, and the things that they do. I was determined to avoid that, and we did it.
There literally there's no bad stories about preachers' kids.
Of course.
That was easy.
Right.
Awesome.
That's
We
all men.
appreciate that.
That's going to do it for us this week. You can find out more about today's guest and view all of the Black Church in Detroit episodes at AmericanBlackJournal.org. Plus, you can connect with us anytime on Facebook and on Twitter. Take care, and we'll see you next time.
From Delta faucets to Behr paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Support also provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV.
The DTE Foundation proudly supports 50 years of American Black Journal in covering African American history, culture, and politics. The DTE Foundation and American Black Journal partners in presenting African American perspectives about our communities and in our world.
Also brought to you by Nissan Foundation and viewers like you. Thank you.